Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this one, we will create an Angular blog application in which we will perform CRUD operations, and we will create an ASP.NET Core web API in which we will install Entity Framework to talk to our SQL Server database. So we will perform CRUD operations on that SQL Server database. And if you look at this Angular application, we will have a list of blogs. Currently, I just have one, but if you have more than one, you will have a loop so that it goes on and you have a scroll bar. So if you want to view a single blog, you can click on this view blog post and it will show you the blog as well as the content in here. And this is basically HTML rendered as string later on. But you can see this is a blog post as you see on other blogs, and this is getting the data from an ASP.NET Core Web API, which is in turn getting the data from a SQL Server database. So we have this section for the public, and as well as we have a section for the admin in which the admin would be able to manage all the blog posts by performing CRUD operations. So they can see all the blog posts, they can view a single blog post, and there they can delete it as well, and they can also add a new blog post. So they'll be able to perform CRUD operations, and yeah, we'll have a public interface as well in which public users will be able to access the blog. So yeah, I hope you will enjoy this video and you will gain something out of it. If you do, please press the like button and subscribe to my channel as well. So let's get on to it. Please hit that like button if you liked the video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on my next upload. To start building my blog, I will first create a folder structure. I have created my folder build a blog with Angular and ASP.NET Core. And inside that, I've created two folders, one for the API and one for the UI. I will start by creating the API first. So I will create an API, an ASP.NET Core Web API inside this folder. So I will copy the path and I will open Visual Studio 2022. I will click on create a new project. And from this list, I have selected C#. And from this list, I will select ASP.NET Core Web API. I will click next. I will give it a location. So I will paste the path over here, and I will give a project name and solution name. So I will call my blog the dev blog.api, and I will remove the .api from the solution name. Click on next. And from here, I will select the .NET 6 framework, which is sometimes called the ASP.NET Core version 6. This is the latest at the time of the recording of this video. So I will select that and I will keep this intact. I will click on create. Visual Studio 2022 has provided me and created me a brand new ASP.NET Core Web API, and that's based on the .NET 6 version. And if I run it, I get this out of the box. We have Swagger UI already added to this API, and as part of it, we only get one API endpoint, which is the weather forecast endpoint. And in that, we have the one single get function. If I click on try it out and click on execute, I can see we have a list of weather forecasts for available to us as part of the get function, but we don't need that. We want to create our own blog API. So I'll stop this application, and the first thing I want to do is to install Entity Framework Core so that we can use our ASP.NET Core Web API to persist data to a SQL Server database. So let's first install Entity Framework Core. So I will come to dependencies and right click over here to click on manage NuGet packages. And after that, I will click on the browse tab and will search for these three packages and install them. So I will first search for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Click on that and click on install. The second package is to install SQL Server in here. So I will search for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. Click on that package and click on install. And the last package that we would need is Microsoft.EntityFramework.Core.Tools. This is needed for running Entity Framework Core migrations, which is needed to create a new database inside the SQL Server. So I will search that package and click on install. So now that we have all our 3 packages for Entity Framework installed, it's now time to create a new domain model which will be persisted inside the SQL Server. So in here I will create a new folder called entities, or let's create a models folder first, and inside the models folder I will create a new folder called entities. So entities is something that needs to be persisted and has a unique identifier called ID. So in here I will create a new class, and this will be our domain model, our domain entity. So I will call this the post. So that will be our blog post, and as you know, blog consists of posts and tags and comments, but in this example application we will create posts, and we will also create CRUD operations for the ASP.NET Core web API. So inside post, let's see how our domain model would look like. I will start adding properties for our entity, starting with the ID. So I will first create a GUID with the name of ID, and after that I will have the post title. So I will have public string of title, and after that I will have another property. So the shortcut is prop tab, and after that I will have another string property which will be called content. This will hold the HTML content of that blog post. The next property that we will have is the summary. So another property of type string which will be called summary, and this will have a string value of a brief summary of what the blog post is. Sometimes you see there are a couple of lines inside the blogs that you see, so that will be our summary of that blog post. After that we will have the URL handle, so another string which will be called URL handle, and this will be the name of the blog post. For example, if your blog post is like how to build a blog, this URL handle will have that information, so that it's also readable by the search engine bots like Google. The next property I will have is the featured image, so another string, and I will call it featured image URL. So this will have the URL, the complete URL to which this featured image of this blog post is stored. So I'll just straight away use this image URL and use it at the top of the blog post, and sometimes in the collection as well. So let's see how we will use it later on. After that, the next property will be a boolean which will hold the value of visible, so whether this blog post is visible to the public or not. The next one would be a string property called author. So for example, if I'm writing the blog, that will be my name. If somebody else is writing the blog, that will be their name. So after the author, we'll have two date properties. So the first one is a date time of the created one, so published date, and another one will be updated date. Alright, so I think we have our domain model ready. It's now time to use Entity Framework Core to create a DbContext. So I will come over here, right click and add a new folder. I will call it data, and inside data I will add another class called the dev blog DbContext and .cs. Click add, and this will basically inherit the DbContext class. So control dot to pull in the dependencies from Microsoft.entity-framework core. And if I click over here, let's create a constructor for this. So control dot, and using this generate constructor options, so I'll pass the options to the base class, which is to the base DbContext class. And after the constructor, I want to create a DB set. A DB set is basically like a table inside SQL Server. So Entity Framework Core will use this DbContext class and also this DB set that we will define over here to create a new table in the database if it doesn't exist. So I will create another property called DB set, and that will be of type post, which we have created just now. So I will add post from entities, and I will call this property posts. So when we run migrations, Entity Framework Core migrations, this will be our posts table inside SQL Server. Now that we have created our DbContext, it is now time to create a connection string that Entity Framework Core will use to create a new database inside SQL Server. So I've opened my app settings.json, and below the allowed hosts, I will create a connection strings key, and I will create a new property for this connection string. I will call this the dev blog connection string, or you can call it something else as well. And in here, I will provide the server database information. So this server will be the server that I'm using as part of SQL Server. So I will open my SQL Server Management Studio, and if you have installed this properly, you will have a server. So if you go to connect this object, the server name I am using as part of this example is the localDB/MSSQL localDB. This could be something different for your SQL Server. So use the server that you are able to connect with. So I'm using this, and if I come back to my ASP.NET Core, I've pasted it over here. After that, separating with a semicolon, I will give the database name. So database, the name I want the database to be is the dev blog DB. You can give it any other name as you like, because it doesn't exist at the moment. If I connect to this SQL Server and if I refresh this, there is no database called the dev DB. So I will use Entity Framework Core migrations to create this database. After that, I will enter the trusted connection is equal to true attribute. So trusted underscore connection is equal to true. And this completes our connection string. Now it's time to inject our DbContext inside the services, inside ASP.NET Core dependency injection. So I will come over here to program.cs, and using dependency injection, I will inject the DbContext inside services. So I will use builder.services, and this is just before we are building the application. So builder.services.add DbContext. I will give the type of the DbContext the dev DbContext, control dot to pull the dependencies, the dev blog DbContext, control dot, and use it from the data folder. And after that, it takes the connection to the database. If you can see over here, we will give the service provider first. So we will say options such that options dot use SQL Server. So options such that options dot use SQL Server, control dot, and sometimes, okay, now it's pulling it back. So I'll use Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, and the use SQL Server would need a connection string. So I can specify a string connection string as part of the parameter, and I will take the connection string from what I defined in the app settings. So I will call the builder again. So builder dot configuration dot get connection string, and I will specify the key. So the key is this one. If you have defined it something else, you have to specify the one that you have defined. So I'll copy this one and I will paste it inside here, and I will move everything down so that it's more readable. So I think I have one less bracket, so now it completes this. So now we have injected the DbContext inside our application, and now it's time to run Entity Framework Core migrations. So to do that, I will come over here to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and click on Package Manager Console. It brings up the console window over here. The first command I will type is add-migration, and after a space I can give the name of the migration that we are giving. So this is creating our database for the first time, so I will call it initial migration. Click enter, and this has started the migration process. So what Entity Framework Core has done is it has created a new migrations folder over here, and it has created this new initial migration.cs file. And if you look at it, it has two functions, an up function and a down function. The up function is basically what it wants to create in the database, which it thinks it doesn't exist, and the down function is anything it wants to remove. So it's dropping the table first if it exists, and after that it's creating a new table with the columns that we specified as part of the entities inside the model, and it's creating the primary key as well for us. So it's doing everything that's needed to create a table inside SQL Server. So the next command we want to execute is to update the database. So update -database, and click enter. Before clicking enter, I just want to show you that nothing has been created till now. So if I refresh this, there's no database, and if I press enter over here now, this has started creating the database for us and the table as well. So it has run the script now and it says done. If I come back and refresh the server again, this time I can see this new database, the dev blog db, which is the name of the database that we defined in the app settings.json. If I expand on that, I can see inside tables I have this new table called posts, and it has all the columns that we defined in as part of our entity. So that's our domain model, which is now inside a SQL Server database as well. So we will use this table and we will use Entity Framework Core so that it can talk to our application and SQL Server and basically fetch and persist data for us. So I'll close this migration file as well. The next step is to create a new controller, and I will come to controllers, right click over here and add a new controller. This will be our new API. So I will use this empty one and click on add. I will call this home, instead of the home controller, I will call this the posts controller, and enter. And it has created a new controller for us with a single index iActionResult method. I'll delete that and I'll start fresh. The first thing I'll do is to decorate this controller with the attribute of API controller, telling it that this is a controller for the API. And after that, I will also give a route to this controller. So the route for this one would be in a string, API slash the name of the controller, which is posts. So in brackets, I will say controller, and it will automatically map the name of the controller, which is posts, to this one, to the route. So our API would be, the endpoint would be called the localhost something something slash API slash posts. And after that, here we will create our CRUD operations. So we will create a get all, a get single post. We will add a new post, and we will update and delete existing posts as well. So let's start by getting all the posts. So I will create a new method, public iActionResult get all posts, And in here, I want to write something so that I can get the posts from the database. To do that, I have to use the DbContext that we injected, because DbContext is a way for us to talk to the SQL Server via Entity Framework Core. So I will create a constructor, and using constructor injection, I will inject the DbContext over here. So I will inject the dev blog DbContext. So control dot to pull in the dependencies and call it DbContext, and control dot over here to create an assign field. So I'll use this DbContext private field to access the database. So in here, I will say DbContext dot and I will access the posts. So I will access the posts property. So that's the post table if you want to look at like that from a SQL Server perspective. And from here, I want to get all the posts. So I can use a function called toList, and I can do it like that. Or let's make our controller asynchronous. So I will use the async keyword over here, and I will wrap the iAction result in a task like that. And now I can use the toList async method, control dot to pull in this from Entity Framework Core. And because this is an async function, we have to use the await keyword, and we can say var posts is equal to this, store it in a variable. And after storing it in a variable, we don't have to do anything. We can simply return an OK response, because in a RESTful world, we want to respond with a 200 success. So OK for us is an iAction result, which wraps this posts inside a nicely structured 200 response. So we will create an OK response, and inside the OK response, we will send the posts that we have got. You can directly do everything over here, or you can just get it in a variable and then put it inside the OK response. So with that, it's now time to test it, but we don't have any data. So what I'll do is I'll seed some data inside that. So I'll go back to my SQL Server to seed some data. I've come back to SQL Server database, and I have created an insert statement in which I'm adding values to the ID, title, content, and all the other fields. And I will select that and click on execute. And this has created one record for us. Let's just quickly see the record. So select star from posts, and you can see this is the record that we just created, and it has all the fields that we need. So if we come back to the ASP.NET Core application, this getAllPost method, because it's connected to the SQL Server database, it should be able to retrieve that one record that we just created. So it's now time to run this application and see if we are able to use Swagger. And if I come back over here, I'll refresh the application now. And the error is because we have not given an HTTP GET method here. I know it's the only function here, but Swagger still now uses it. So we will have to define the HTTP GET attribute for this getAllPosts method. And I will run this again and come back to my browser. And as you can see now, it's all resolved. So now we have, apart from the weather forecast controller, we have the posts controller, which is the posts endpoint, and we have the get method to get all the posts. If I expand that and click on try it out, it's now going back to the database and retrieving the record for us, the post for us, and you can see it's an array. It only has one item at the moment, but here's the ID, here's the title, which is published an ASP.NET Core website. This is from one of my blog website that I have, and the link is in the description below if you want to check it out. So that's the content of it, and we have a little summary. We have the URL handle, so it'll go to some location /blog/publish ASP.NET Core application. It also has a featured image URL, and it will be visible to the users. It's written by me, and we have the dates for that. So now we have written one method to get all the posts. At the moment we only have one, But let's come back to our controller and create more methods to complete our CRUD operations. So I will come over here and create a new method called get single post, or get post by ID. So I will create a public async get post by ID, and instead of the in, we are using GUIDs. So I will use a GUID, and I will annotate this method with the HTTP get keyword as well. And I will create a route for this. And in the route, I will specify the ID that we want to map, and this parameter will be mapped to the ID. So inside the string, I will have curly braces, call it the ID because it has to map the parameter over here. And I will also add a GUID type so that it becomes type safe. And with that, I have the ID coming inside over here in the function get post by ID. So I will use the DbContext here again. So I will use the DbContext dot go to the posts table, and I will use a find. I can use find. I can also use first or default. So I'll use first or default, where x such that x dot id matches the ID that we are passing in. And let's store that in a variable which is post. And because this is an async method, we will use an async method. So first or default async. And because this is an async method, we will use the await keyword. And we will see if the post is not equal to null, we will return an OK response, and we will wrap the post inside the OK response. So we will send the post back. If it was null, we will return a not found back. So that's a 404. So we will return a not found back. We can pass in a message, but that's fine at the moment. So this completes our get post by ID, and let's just quickly run the application again to see if we are able to fetch our the single ID the single post we have. So we have a new endpoint, and let's quickly get the GUID first. So using this ID, I should be able to get a single ID. So I'll come to that method, click on try it out, and click execute. And as you can see, it's gone back to the database, and it's able to bring that single post on the basis of the ID. So we have finished the get operations. So we are getting all the posts back, and we are also getting a single post back. So now it's time to create the add method, and which translates to the HTTP post method. So we'll come back, and I'll stop the application first. I will start by creating the method. So that'll be an HTTP post method, and I will start by public async task of action action result, and I will call this add post. And the add post method will take some parameters, but we'll come to that. The route of this add post will be the same as the default route of the controller of this API. So API/posts, and here it will take a new post request. So I will create a new model for this, and I will have a DTO model. So right click, add a new folder, and I will call this, and it should be outside the entities folder. So I will rename this to DTO, and inside the DTO I will have a add request model. So I will call this add post request, and this add post request will basically act as a data transfer object. That's what the DTO is called, and it will have almost the similar properties of what a post entity has, but instead of the ID, we don't want the client to send the IDs to us. We will create the ID ourselves. So apart from the ID, I will take everything else from here, and I will paste it in the add post request as well. So now we can use this add post request. So add post request control dot, and bring in from DTOs, give it a name, and now we can use this. So we will first change this DTO to an entity. So we will convert DTO to entity. So I will first create a var post is equal to new post, which is from entity, and I will say the title is equal to add post request dot title. Content is coming from the property of content, and similarly I'll do the other fields as well. So we have mapped all the properties apart from the ID, because we will be creating the ID ourselves. And after that, we can use the DbContext to actually create a new post. So I will use the DbContext dot posts dot add, and I will add this post. And what you can also do is you can also assign it a new ID field yourselves. So ID is equal to GUID dot new GUID. And once the post has been added, we have an add async method, I believe. And we will use the await keyword. And after that, this doesn't save the post to the table. After that, we have to use one more command, which is await DbContext save changes async. And on save changes async, Entity Framework Core actually saves or commits the changes to the SQL Server database. So we will use that, and once it has been done, we can return a 201 back, because HTTP post method create a return back a 201 created back. So in ASP.NET Core, we can use the created at action method. So return created at action, and this takes an action name. And we basically want to give the location where the client can just go and retrieve this new post back. So we will use the get post by ID. I will start by giving it an action name, and I will give the same name because I want it to be type safe. And here I will give it name of this method, so that becomes type safe. And after that, I want to give the ID and the object as well. So I will first pass the parameter, which is this ID parameter. So a new object with the name of ID, and that is equal to post.id that we have. And after that, we can pass the whole object back, which is the newly created post object. So this will basically add the new post into the database and then return the location of this new post to the client, so that if it wants to access this new post, it can do so by using the header field of the location. After that, we will do the HTTP put method, which stands for update. So we'll create an update post method. I will start by the HTTP put keyword and public async task of type I action result. Call this method update post, and the route of the update post will take the ID, which we will map to the parameter as well. So we will create a route, and this will be similar to what we have in getting a single post. So I will copy it from there and paste it here. And now we can access the ID which is coming in the route, and I can also be safe and call this from route. And after that, we want to access the updated post, the thing that Angular is sending as part of the update. So we will create a new request as part of the DTO. I will create a new DTO over here, and I will call this update post request, and it will have the same properties as of the add. If you want to not update some properties, you can skip them, but otherwise all the other properties will come here. And as you can see, ID is missing from here because we don't want to update the ID. We want to update every other field instead. So in here, I will use the update post request as well, give it a name. And in here, the first thing we'll do is to convert the DTO to entity. So I will use this and just change the name of the request model. And after that, I will use this DTO, the entity, to go back to the database to check if the this post exists or not. So check if exists. So I will use DbContext dot find, and I can give the ID field to that. So this dot posts dot find, and I can pass it the ID field, and it will return an existing post if the SQL Server database has that. So let's see if we have a find async. Yeah, so we will use the find async, and we will have the await keyword as well. After that, we will see if the existing post is not equal to null. Then we will use this converted entity and we will update it. So we will use this existing property dot, and actually we don't want the conversion to happen here. We want the conversion to happen inside, so that once we know if the post has been found, we will do the conversion here. So I will take the request object and then assign the values over here like that, and I will copy stuff from here and paste it over here so that my process can be a little faster. And I'll just quickly correct this. And instead of the commas, I would need semicolons. All right, with that, we have overridden the existing post, and let's see what the issue is here. If existing post is not null, which is correct, first of all, we don't need this, so I'll remove that. And we are using the await. It is a post. I think it's a temporary error. I'll just press Ctrl+Shift+B to see if it still is there or not. Okay, the error is that I have a space between the not and equals. So if existing post is not equal to null, then do the conversion over here. Basically, update the existing post, and then after updating the existing post, we will use the save and change async. So DbContext dot save changes async, and this will basically update the database and the table. So we have updated the post over here. If the existing post is not found, that means there was no entry with the ID of the one that we have passed in. So we will return a not found. And if the save changes was done, we will return an OK back. And you can send the existing post back. And this will be the updated one. So with that, I can close this. With that, we have the update post also ready. So the last function we have to create, and we will test our API after this, is the HTTP delete, which is the delete method. So we will use that. I will have the same route as of the update because I want to delete based on the ID. And after that, I will say public async task of iAction result. We will call it delete post, and here I will just take the ID and nothing else. I don't want any object in the parameters over here. So we will use the same find property. I will call the dbContext.posts.find async and pass the ID over there. Store it in a variable. So existing post, we will check if the existing post is not null. That means we have found the post, we want to delete it. So we will say dbContext.remove and we will pass the entity in there. And then we will save the changes. So dbContext.save changes async. Use the await keyword. And if the existing post was not found, that means it was just anything else, and we will return a not found back again. And if it was deleted, we will return an OK object with the existing post if the client wants to do anything with it. So we will say, okay, this was deleted and here's your post. So we have implemented our CRUD operations here. We have the get all, the get single, get post by ID. We have add post, update and delete. So let's run this application again and see if we are able to perform all the operations or not. So here's my Swagger, and as you can see, we have the endpoints for the get, post, put and delete as well. So I'll just show you quickly. We only have one ID at the moment, so one post and nothing else. So let's start with the add property, which is the post. And in here, I will give some details so that it can be added to the list. So I'll say this is another blog post, and I will use the same content in here. This can be a string, or if you are using the HTML to store in the database, it can be an HTML as well. So I'm using HTML because I want to show it as an HTML, and the summary can be the same. The URL handle can be this is another post, and featured image can be anything, https google.com/image. Doesn't go anywhere, but just give you the point. Author can be my name, and this is the published date and updated date, so it could be with time or without time as well. So I'll click on the execute button to see if it gets added or not. We get a 201 back, as I said that post requests return a 201 created, and you can see the created object with the newly created ID. And we also have this header location, a header with the key of location, and it points to this URL. If I use this URL directly inside the browser, it gives you the location of this newly created resource, and that's why we send the HTTP 201 created response back. So just to confirm, I will come back to my get all method, click on execute, and now we will have this is the first record and this is the second ID. This is another post. So we have successfully added a new post in our database using our web API. So it's time to now use the update method to update this newly created post. So I will change a few details in here. First of all, I will minimize this and come to the the put method, which is the update. I will send the ID in, and I will also copy the whole object so that it becomes easier. I don't need the ID because ID is not part of the update request. And let's say I changed this to updated title, and I also paste it here at the end and here, just to give you some idea. So I've updated 3 details. I'll click on the execute button, and as you can see, we get a 200 back, which is a success response, and it comes back with the updated details of the post. And again, just to confirm, I'll minimize this. just to confirm, I will execute the get all request, and this time the details of the post have been changed to whatever we changed it to. So now it's time to test this last method, which is the HTTP delete method. I'll take the ID and I'll come over here because it only needs the ID. I will paste the ID over here and click on execute. And it gives us a 500 back because we have made a mistake over somewhere. Let's go back to our application to correct this. We have an HTTP delete method, ID of COVID. That's all correct. Here we are not using the await keyword, so let's use the await keyword over here because this wasn't getting called without the await keyword. And I'll start the application again. So I've started the application again. I'll quickly wait for this to get refreshed. I'll get the ID to the second post again, which is this one. So I'll copy that, come back to my delete method and paste the ID and click on execute. And this time it has successfully deleted the post, comes back with a 200 and the deleted object as well. And now if I click on execute, it doesn't have the second post anywhere. So we can see our API is now all working. We have implemented CRUD operations in here. It's now time to create our Angular application and give it a face to the API. So let's create ourselves a new Angular application. To create a new Angular application, I've come back to my folder structure and I will go to my UI folder. And as you can see, I have a command prompt window open. And if you are using a Mac, you can use a terminal. And in here I have Node.js installed, npm installed, and I also have the Angular CLI installed as well. So after you have these two things installed, you can actually use the Angular CLI to create yourself an Angular application. So I will create the application by saying ng new and then the name of the application, which will be the dev blog, and click enter. So this will create an Angular application for us and it will ask us a few details over here. It's asking me to add routing. I will say yes, and then I will choose CSS as my style sheet format. The Angular application has been successfully created, and I will open my application now by browsing into this folder. I will say cd the dev blog, and then I will use Visual Studio Code to open this solution. So I will say code dot because I am in the context of that folder. So this is opening Visual Studio. I will say yes, and I will open Visual Studio Code. And I will now use the terminal. So I'll create a new terminal and let's start this Angular application to see what we get out of the box. So I will start the application by writing ng serve -o to open, and this will take some time if it's starting for the first time. I have changed the theme and I have started my Angular application over here, and if I open it in the browser to localhost 4200, you can see there is some static HTML that has been created by the Angular CLI by default, and it goes to the Angular documentation. But we will clean this up and we will create our own HTML. So I will come back to the Angular code and open the app folder. app.component.html is the one responsible for all the HTML that you see on the screen. So I will Control A and delete, and instead of that I will just place the router-outlet element, and this is responsible for displaying the components which we are using as part of routes. So now that we have that installed or placed, we will first create a component here which will be /admin/posts, and that will be used by the admin to basically view all the blog posts that we have. So let's create the admin posts component first. So inside the app, I will create a new folder called admin, and inside admin I will create a new component. So I will create a new terminal and I will browse to admin first. So cd source app admin, and in here I will type the command nggc, g for generate, c for component, and create the let's say the admin posts component. And this is getting created. And in the admin posts component, in the HTML we have this paragraph which says it works. We want to display it on the screen as well, and for that we have to create a route. So we will come to the app.routing module, and inside the array we will create a new object. We will give it a path property and will assign this value admin/posts, and when this route is browsed by the user, we will load this component, which is the admin posts component. And now we have to work in this component to get all the blog posts by talking to the ASP.NET Core Web API. So I will close this and open the admin posts component.ts, and inside the ng-oninit method over here, we have to somehow link this Angular service to our API. And for making HTTP calls, we use services inside Angular. So inside the app folder, I will first create a new folder called services, and I will browse to this folder. So cd ... services, and I will generate a new service. So nggs, the service name will be the post service. So click enter, and our new service has been created. So this is the new service. Now we will make use of the HTTP client module, and we will actually talk to the ASP.NET Core Web API. So we will first import the client, the HTTP client module. So that is HTTP client module, and I will create the import statement over here. So import the HTTP client module from Angular /common/HTTP, and this is all resolved. So now we can inject the HTTP client over here. So private HTTP is of type HTTP client, and we can now create a method called getAllPosts, and this method will use this HTTP client to talk to the web API using the get method, because that's a getAllPosts call. And this method would now take a string which will be the URL for that method, and to achieve that URL we will first create a base URL for the API. So I will create a new property inside the environment. So API base URL will be, I will open Swagger and copy this URL from here, and yours could be something different, so copy it from your Swagger and save that. Now I can use that environment variable and create a new variable over here called API base URL and assign it that value, environment.API base URL. Using this API base URL, I will call it like this, and add the route to the posts, the get all post method. So /API/posts, and this returns an observable, and we can actually make it type safe by actually binding it to a return type. But for that we need a model. So let's create a new model folder inside app. So I'll create a folder called models, and inside the models folder I will create a new file called post.model.ts, and I've actually created this model to speed things up. So this model post will have the same properties as we have in the entities post over here. So it has ID, title, content, and every other field as well. So we have similar properties over here. Now we can use this post model to actually return this. So this API would return a post array, and I can use the return keyword. This will be of type observable post array, and we can now use this service inside the admin post component. So I will first inject the service over here. Private post service is of type post service, and now use that service inside the ng on init. So when the page loads, we want to call the API to get all the posts. Because it's an observable, we have to subscribe to it to get the changes, and we will console log the response like this. And let's go to our browser and open that route /admin/posts, and you can see the HTML is loading, but let's click on inspect element to see if we got anything back. We didn't get anything back. Instead we got an error saying that access to this URL from this origin has been blocked. As you can see that it is blocked by a CORS policy, because the URLs of the API and Angular application were different. One is at localhost 7036, the other one is at localhost 4200. Because these are different, the browser has blocked this request. We can achieve this by telling the server to allow it. So let's go back to our API application, and we have to tell this application to accept this origin. So I will come to the program.cs file and first inject CORS inside the application. So I will say builder.services.add CORS, and I will use the options.add policy. I will give a name to the policy. Let's call it default, and then I will use the policy options, and I will tell the policy to allow any header, and then allow any origin, and also allow any method. So this way we are allowing every request and making our API public. You can go ahead and you can block a few requests based on the URL or method, but for this example I'm just keeping it open. After you have injected the CORS, we want to use it in the pipeline. We will come over here and we will use CORS by specifying the same policy name as we used above. So this should match this. So our API has now been configured to talk to other client applications which are on different URLs. So I'll start this API again, and I'll just quickly refresh Swagger to see if it's working. And now if I refresh the Angular, something went wrong. There has been an error in the API. I think it's already in use, that's why it's not able to start it again. But I'll just stop and start the application to see if it works. So now our API is running, and if I now refresh this Angular application, it's trying to talk to the data to the API, and as you can see here, it's not gotten the CORS error now. It's actually went to the database, and the API solution is able to get the record from the database, and our Angular application is now able to talk to the API as well. So we will use this information and display it on the screen over here so that the admin can manage it. In here, we can now assign this response to a variable. So I will create a variable over here. Posts is of type post array, and I will initiate it to empty. Import the using statements, and I will assign this posts to the response, or I will assign the response to this variable called posts. And now I can use this posts inside the admin post component. So I will create a table. I will create a t head in which there will be a tr and a th. So the header would be called title, and there will be another one which will be used as an empty placeholder for a button. After that, we'll have a t body, which will have a tr and a td. In the tr, we'll have a ng for loop, and we will iterate on the posts. I will just display the name of the title of the post. So post dot title, and then in the second element, the second td, we will have an anchor element which will have a button of view. So using this anchor element, the admin should be able to navigate from this list to the individual blog details. So if I come back to the application, I should be able to see this single blog post. Ideally, this is a table, so we only have one record in the database, but if you have multiple, it should come as a table. So now I will just use Bootstrap to style this. So I will copy the CSS and JS. I will come back to my index.html, and in the head section, I will place the CSS and also the JS. And if I refresh this, now I should be able to use Bootstrap. So I'll come to the tables section and use this class called table. So I will come back to my HTML, say class of table, and let's see if we are able to get it. Yeah, it's able to show the table in terms of Bootstrap, and I can also use a container as well. So I will wrap this in a div.container and paste the table inside the container, and this looks better. And we can also add an h1 tag to say all blog posts, and we can have some space over here, but let's see how it looks like. And we can have space above and below by using your own. I'm just adding br classes, br element, and a few over here as well. Ideally, I would write custom CSS, but just for this example, I'm using this br element. And yeah, this is looking much better. So now our admin would be able to see all the blog posts, which will be 1, 2, 3, and then now we would want a functionality for the admin to be able to see all the details of this blog post. So using this view button, the admin should be able to go to another screen to view all the details of that blog post. So let's create that. I will close all of these first, and we have to create a new component, and we will name it, let's say view blog component. And we will go back to the admin folder. So I will come back one level, so cd admin, and we will create a new folder called new component called ngc admin view post, and click enter to create a new component. And our new component will get added over here. So here's our new component, and in here we have this, and we have the TypeScript file. So we have to pass the details of that ID to this component so that we can load the single single blog post details. So first of all, we have to connect this view button to the next component. So I will first create a route. I will come to app routing module, and I will create another object with the path of admin/posts/id, and this is how we will pass the ID of that blog post that the admin wants to view. And when this route is browsed, we will show the admin view post component. And we also want to pass the details from the anchor element. So I will come back to the admin posts, and in here I will use router link, and I will pass the routes. So /admin/posts, and then the next argument will be post.id. So this will be part of the route. And if I come back to the application, this becomes a link now, and when I hover over it, you can see on the left hand side bottom it browses to /admin/posts and then the ID. So if I click on this, it actually goes to that URL, and you can see that the admin view post component, the new component, now works. So we will change this and create our own HTML now, so that we are able to see all the details of that particular blog post. So I will come back, and first of all, it's a good idea to first get the details of that particular blog post. So I will first on the ng-on init, I will first use the activated route to get that ID from the route. So in here, in the constructor, I will inject the activated route. So private route is of type activated route. And now in ng-on init, I can use this route. So this dot route dot param map, and we have to subscribe to the param map. Oh, sorry, not subscribe. We have to this dot route dot param map dot subscribe. So yeah, we have the subscribe method on the param map, and inside the subscribe we will say params, such that now we will get the param based on the keyword, which is ID. So we will say const ID is equal to params dot get, and we will get it by the string name, which is ID. This should match what we have given in the routing module, which is this one. So once we have the ID, we'll just quickly check that if ID is not null and defined, then we will go to the service to get a single blog post. So here we will define another method called get post by ID, and we will use the ID of type string, and then we will use the HTTP client to get a single post. So the route for the single post is this plus and we have an extra slash over here plus the ID of the post. So ID goes in the route, so that should give us the details of the single post, and in return I can actually map it to a post, and we'll have a return type of observable of type post. Our method is complete. It's now time to use it inside the component. So we will start by injecting the service. Private post service is of type post service, and using this post service I can get a post by ID and pass the ID over here. Now this is returning an observable, so we have to subscribe to this method, and we will console the response again. So I'll say console.log response, and if I save all the changes, come back to my browser, right click, inspect element, come to console, and I will refresh on the same ID because that exists. You should be able to get the details of the single blog post from the API. As you can see here, we are returning all the details back. So now it's time to use it inside the HTML and make it look pretty. So I will work on the HTML now. I don't need this. So start with the container, and I'll use a lot of Bootstrap classes. So I will come over here and basically search for a form. So use a form like this. We will have labels and text boxes. So I will use a form and then use something like this. So I'll come back to my Angular, use it like this, and I just need one for now. Have the label, and we have the type of text, and we need the class. We don't need the ID. We don't need the area as well. I'm just removing the extra stuff from here. The first element would be ID, and we can actually assign the ID now. So in the component, instead of logging it, we will assign it to a variable, post of type post, and this can be a post or undefined. And finally, when we have something, we can assign this dot post from the response. So now we can use the post inside here, and we can use value, but we will use ng model to actually use it to have two-way data binding, because we ultimately want to update it as well. So first of all, to use the forms module, we will come back to our app.module.ts, and below the HTTP client module, we will also use the forms module, and this has imported the forms module from Angular Forms. So I will save that, and in here I will first start by creating a variable for a form is equal to ng form, and then I can also use the model. So I'll first define a name, that will be ID, and then ng model, and this is how we do two-way data binding. This will be post.id. So I want to assign the ID from there inside here. We are getting a nullable exception, and what I can do is I can say ng if we have something in the post, then only do all of this stuff. it's throwing me an error because my form isn't getting closed. Let's just see if we are able to display a single ID back. So I'll open Opera again, my browser, and you can see we are able to use Bootstrap classes as well, and we are able to display the post attribute, the blog post, into our form. So let's continue to display the other properties as well, and also give it a heading over here. So in the container, I will use the h1 tag again to say view blog, and I can have margins, or I'm just using a BR for now. You can use margins or paddings. So refresh that, and you can see we have some space now. So I'll continue to add the other elements. So using the same div, I will say the second element to be title, and the first one will be read only because it's an ID property. We don't want it to update, so it's a read only field. The second one is the title, so I'll give the name of title, and it's getting from the title model, and similarly I'll do the rest as well. This is a text area because it's an it will be HTML displayed, so text area with the class of form control, and then the same name and ng model. So I'll change it to content, and if I go back to the browser, refresh, and we are able to see the changes as well. So moving on, the next one would be the featured URL. Give it a name, and the post.featured URL. And this is not a text area, this is an input field. So I'll use it like this as an input field. We also have a summary, so I'll display the summary in a text area as well. So summary, and after that we have author, and refresh that. We have the image and the author as well. Let's see what other properties we have. Let's go to the post model. So we have used, okay, we have to give the URL handle as well, and the dates and the visible property. So let's start with the URL handle. After that, we want to give the visible property. So visible, and let's use a checkbox. So input type of checkbox and name it visible, and ng model of post.visible. And let's see if it's working or not, because this was set to true and this is checked by default as well. I have to give it a class which will be form control, hopefully. So it's not a form control. Let's see what checkboxes are in Bootstrap. To give a checkbox, you can say form check input as a class. So, and we actually have to give it in a different way as well. So I will copy this and then make changes in here. and I will add the MB3. So form check MB3 type checkbox. It's coming from ng model, so we don't need the ID and the value. So we will use the name property and the ng model. Say visible and post.visible. We can remove the for as well because it works with ID. We have removed the ID, and we can have the label as well. So if I now refresh it, now it's looking good, and we can click on the checkbox as well to toggle between the visibility of this blog post. And finally, we have the dates. So I will copy this one, and ideally we just want to update the update date, not the publish date. But yeah, for this example, we just do both. Publish date, and then this will be publish date, and this will be called updated date. So now we have made all the changes. We just need one more button at the bottom. So we'll say button and give it a class of btn primary. Call it save or update. And if we now come back to the application, refresh this, we have a button as well over here. So we can see all the details of the blog post as it was in the database. So this is our view as part of the Crud, the create read. This is the read part. So now we will perform the update part by actually changing the details over here and saving it to the API as well. So to perform the save operation on this, we have to link the ng forms on submit method. So we'll say ng submit is equal to on submit, and we will create a new method inside the add view post component. So I will minimize this ng view. I'll create a new method which will return void, and we will use this post method to actually call this service, and then the service will interact with the API. So let's start with the service to update post, and this update post method will take an ID, and it will also take the updated method, the updated request, which is the update post request. So we will create another model. Inside the models, we will create another file called update-post.model.ts, and we will copy the same properties from here, but we will not use the ID property, and we will call this update post request. So we don't need the ID, and from here we will use this request inside this service. Update post request is of, the name is update post request, is of type this, import the dependencies, and then in here use the HTTP client to put the update request to the API. So it's an update, it's a put method. Put method needs a URL and then the body. So the URL of this method would be same as the get single one, and we have the ID that we want to pass, and after that we want to send the request in, which is this. So this makes it happy, and in return we will get a post back, which will be of type observable of type post, and we want to return this as well. So we can now use this post service inside the app component, admin view post component. So we will start by injecting, we already have injected the service, so we can use the service. So this dot post service dot update, and it seems to have a problem because we haven't initiated the method with the braces. So dot update post takes the ID. The ID is post dot ID, and then we want the updated post request, which we don't have at the moment, but we can certainly create one. So we can say const update post request is equal to, which is of type update post request, and then we can map the details one by one. So author is coming from post.author, and let's see what the error is. It's saying we have this undefined or to string. So this is basically a string, and this can be string / undefined. So we can call this as string / undefined, and similarly to all the others as well. Once you've made the change, we'll come back to the component and fill the rest of the properties. This dot post dot content, featured image is, I'll just copy one and then change, and then I'll copy paste a few more. Then we have published date, then we have updated date, we have visible, we have author. I think author is done. Then we have summary, we also have title, and the last one is the URL handle. So once you have created this request, we can now pass in the request in the method. It's again saying that update post is not assignable to string, so we have to give it a string or undefined. And now that we have given the request, it's returning an observable, so we can subscribe to the observable, and when we get the response, we can console log the response, or we can say alert this was successful, or success, anything that you want to display. Let's see if this is actually working or not. So I will come back, refresh this page, and I will make a slight change somewhere. So I will remove the word hosting from the title, so, or let's remove all of it from the title. So now it becomes this short. So I will come and save this. It says success. I'll click OK, and the only way to check at the moment is to go back to my posts URL, and as you can see here, the posts URL, it shows that the post has changed. Now it's something different. It's no longer the bigger URL, and we can bring it back as well, and by actually updating it again, ASP.NET Core hosting. I will save this, and this time I will uncheck the visible button. just to make sure we have some other change as well. Save that. It comes back with a success instantaneously, and let's quickly verify that the title has changed for sure. And if I view the thing, the visible checkbox is also disabled by default. So our update functionality is now working as expected. Now we have performed the update and read capabilities. It's now time to perform the add and delete as well. So I will first create the add functionality, and I will create another component inside admin. So I'm already inside admin, so I will say ng-gc, and this time I will say admin add post component. And I will create that, and this will look very similar to the update component, so this will actually be very fast. And this has created the add post component. What I'll do is I will come over here and copy all the HTML that I have in the view component and paste that in the add component. I will fix all of this as well, but first we have to create a new route for this add component. So I will come to add app routing module, and I will create a new object, and this time I will tell the admin, if the admin goes to admin/posts/add, we will show the admin add component, add post component. So this time this new component that we created will be shown, which is over here. So I'll close other stuff for now and open the add component HTML, and also open the add post component.ts file. I'll first of all start with creating a post variable is of type post, and I will initialize it with empty stuff. I will first import it from models, and I will say author is equal to empty, content is empty, and similarly I'll do the rest as well. So we have created initiated the post variable. Instead of the post, we can also use an add request, add post request, because we don't need the ID to pass it to the API. So instead of the post, I will create a model similar to the update post. So in here I will create a new model called add post.model.ts, and that will have the same properties as of the update model. So I will copy paste that to save my time, and will rename it to add post request. And instead of having the post, we will have the add post request model instead. So it has two things. We have to use dates instead, and what I can do is I can have new date over here and in here as well, or we can convert that to strings and pass strings. So instead of having this as the date object, I will use a string, and I'll show you how to pass strings as well. I will initiate that with empty again. So now we have created this add post request model, and we don't have the ng on submit, so I will remove that for the time being. We don't have the ID, so I will remove that whole div, but other than that we almost have everything else. So let's browse to that add admin/post/add route and see if we are able to get anything. So this /add, as you can see, if I try to go to the /add route, it doesn't do anything. If I come back to the console, if I go back to my application, it says 404 that this route was not found. So let's see if we have added it correctly or not. I'll go back to the app routing module, and in here we can see that /add was not being able to identify because in hierarchy we have the route which has an ID on top of it. So if we change the order and use this instead, we should be able to first match the add, and if add is not matched, we then use the ID. So let's see if this works. And this is called view blog. Instead, this should be called add blog or add post. And now we can see that admin post/add goes to the add blog. And let's verify if our view blog works as well. So yeah, our view blog works and our add blog works as well. So now it's time to create the add blogs functionality to actually talk to the ASP.NET Core Web API as well. So we will first start with the onSubmit method on the form. So using the same approach, ng onSubmit, and we will have to create the onSubmit method inside the component. This method returns a void, and we will use the service which we have to inject. So we will inject the service, which is the post service, and we want to use this post service to call the add method, but the post service at the moment doesn't have the add method. So let's create the add method. So add post, it should take the add post request. We just created that, and when I use the HTTP client to access the post method, I will access the URL for the post method. You can go back to Swagger to check what the URL is, and I will pass the object inside, and then I can map it to the post, which is return type. So the return type is observable of type post, and finally use the return keyword. And while we are here, let's also create the delete method. So that's very simple. The delete post method will only take an ID of type string, and it will call the delete http client.delete method, and will have this URL plus the ID. So I will use this URL instead, and that's it. It doesn't require a body. So that basically now our post service is complete. We can have the methods ready to be used by components. So first of all, we will use the add post component in the admin add post component. In the onSubmit, I will use the post service to access the add post method and pass the request in. The request name is post. We can have a better name for that as well, but it's already being used in the HTML as well, so we will keep that. And this returns an observable. So again, subscribe to the method, and in response, we will say, we will again put an alert and say success. And we will confirm that by going to the list again. So we have made the changes to the add. it's time to test it. So I will create a new blog, let's say yet another blog post, and the content will be some HTML. It could also be a normal string. The summary, the image URL, just any URL, and the author is my name. URL handle would be yet another blog post. It is just that. And after that we have the publish date. So the publish date is today's, which is 2022 -month -date, and the same in the updated date as well. So if I save that, let's see what happens, and we come back with a success. That's good news. If I click OK, and the only way to confirm is to go back to posts, and as you can see, we have added a new post from the Angular application. We are no longer using Swagger UI, and we are able to view this newly created post, and everything is working as well. We have the update already, so update should work as is, you can see. And now it's final touch in the CRUD operations is to add the delete functionality. So we will add another button over here, which will be a simple one. So in the view component, because we are viewing in the view component, so I'll come back to here in the HTML. I will have another button, and let's say I have a margin right to this, or margin left of 3, and this button is called delete, and it's not a primary button, it's a danger button, so that I can see it in red. Refresh that, and you can see we have the delete button over here. I don't know why this is not working, but I'll just give it a style, inline style of margin left of 50 pixels. This should work, hopefully. Yeah, so 50 is too much. I'll just decrease it back to 20, but yeah, you get the point. So we have the delete button. We will now use, instead of the button, we will have an anchor element, and I will have an on click event on this. So a click event, and this will call this delete post method, which we have to create. So let's create that inside the admin view component. I will come here, delete post returns a void, and use the service post service dot delete, and it takes an ID. The ID is we already have the ID inside the view, which is this dot post dot ID. I think this will not work because it's in that object. Let's see, we have this dot post dot ID. Okay, this is either a string or undefined, so I will give it like that. And this way we have used the delete post method. We will subscribe to the changes, and then on the response we will say alert deleted successfully. And you can also go one step ahead and redirect the website to the main posts method. So I will delete this one, this newly created post. So I will click on the delete button. It says deleted successfully, and the way to check it is go back to the posts, and you can see there's only one left now. So we have successfully completed the CRUD operations for the Angular application, and our Angular application is successfully talking to the ASP.NET Core Web API, and everything is just live now. And this was the admin section. We still want to create the users section where users will come and look at blog posts. So that's the next section. I want to create a blog area where public users can just come in and view the blog posts in a nice way, not in a admin way. And all this URLs, I didn't create a navigation because this website is basically for public use, and all the admin area should be authenticated via password so that your public users cannot perform CRUD operations on this application on the website. So yeah, try adding authentication in Angular, but I'll switch to the normal post now, this base URL, and I will actually show the blogs to the public use. So that's next. To create the public blog view area, I will create a new component, and that will be outside the admin area. So I will create a new component. I will come outside first. So I will create a component called ngGC. I will call this posts. So that will be the post component. And I will use this to basically show the blog post. And I will first create a route for myself, and going to the app routing module, on the top over here, I will add a new object, give it a path, and the path will be a base path, just empty, and then component would be the posts component, and that's it. After that, we will come to the post component HTML and see if this path is working. So you can see the base URL now points to this posts component, and here we want to use the HTML to show the blog post. So what we will do is, what I want to achieve from here is, I want to show a single blog post and then have a next and a previous button to navigate to the next blog and the previous blog. So let's start creating the blog post over here. For that, I want to get the first blog post. So I will get all the blog posts first. So I will inject the service private post service is of type post service. Use that service to call the get method, this dot post service dot get all posts, and subscribe to that method. From the response, I want to create a variable over here called posts, which is of type post array, is empty by default, and I will assign this posts array is equal to response. Now my posts may have one or more posts, and I will show the first one only. So I will have another one called post is of type post, so undefined first, or this slash undefined, so that I do need to assign it, and I will assign the first blog post in here. Posts, and I will use the first element inside the array. So I will now use this one to display in the component. So I will first start with the title, and inside the container first, I can actually come to Bootstrap and use the cards. So I will use this cards CSS, and I'll change it according to my one. Style of 18 rem. Let's see how it brings up, but I can remove that. The first one is the image, and the source of this is coming from the post. So I will use the source as post dot featured image URL, and this will show that it's undefined. So I will have ng if we have post. So let's see if even that is working. Refresh that, and we have the card title and we have that image coming as well. So it's looking nice now. Not nice, but we will change that. We will first have the style attribute to have a max width of let's say 500 pixels. Refresh that, and you can see it's coming out to be better. And we will center that as well to say margin 0 auto. This should place it in the center. And we can have margin tops and margin bottoms as well. But now let's work on the card title and some text. So the card title is hard coded at the moment, and we want it to be H1 instead of an H5 for SEO purposes. We will display the post.title, and after that, as part of the paragraph, the card text, we will show it inside an article tag. So the class I have to use is card text, and then we will use post.content directly because that's HTML. And see, I'll save that to refresh and see if we are getting anything. We are getting the HTML back, but it's not, we are getting the title correctly. It's not giving us the HTML as we expect, because we can't use it like that. We have to come back to our application, and instead of that, we have to say the inner HTML. We use the inner HTML is equal to the post.content, and we can remove that from here. Let's see if it now works. Otherwise, yeah, you can see that the article is now working. We are getting some 403s because it's localhost and it's not able to talk to the image hosting provider, but that's all good. You get the point. We have this formatted HTML now, and that's the reason for me for using HTML and not strings, because then we can embed images and formattings as well. So this looks like a blog post now, more like a blog post. And this is a button which we don't need, so I can hide that. You can have other details of author and other stuff as well. So now that we can see that the blog post has been getting displayed, I don't want to display all of this in the main section of the website. It basically has to show all the blogs. So I can now remove this and take it to another component so that you can view all the blog along with the author and other stuff. So I will create another component, say nggc view post, or let's say post, and click enter, and it has created that. And yeah, what I want to do is basically want to take all of this into that method as well, into that component. So inside the post component, I will replace that here like this. And I also want to have on the ng on init based on the ID. So I will come to the post.component.ts, and using injection, I will inject the blog service, the post service. and I will use the post service. So first of all, I want to create a route for this. So app.routing.module, and let's say this goes to /post/blog or anything you want, and it will show the post component. And this will be, just viewing a single blog, and you'll see all of this in action in just a moment. So this will also take the ID, so /ID as we had over here. And now we can use the param map inside here based on the activated route. So private route of type activated route, use that route in here in the ng on init, this dot route dot parammap dot subscribe, and inside the subscribe we will use the params. This dot we will use the params, so const id is equal to params dot get based on the string, which is id, so it has to match the route. And once we have the id, I'll just quickly check it using an if condition, and then we will use the post service get post by id, pass the id in, and then subscribe to the id. So the response of that will be a variable over here, which is post of type post and undefined, and we will assign this post from the response. So now we have all the things we want to display, and we have copied the post already. So let's see if that's working. And to the posts component, we don't want to show the article, we just want to show the summary of the article. So we can show the summary instead, post.summary, and let's see if that's working. I will come to my Opera browser again, and now instead of showing everything, it's showing the post summary instead. And now we can use a smaller heading as well. So instead of using an h1 tag, which is mostly for page headings, we can use h2 instead. And refresh the page. Yeah, that looks good. And you can have spacings in between, you can have buttons called view. So let's have a space in between the h2, and also we would need an anchor element with the class of button primary, which says view blog post, and it leads to the router link. So I will have a router link, and it leads to slash post slash, it has to go in the brackets. So slash posts slash not slash, but I will pass the ID of the post, so post.id, and save that to see if it's working. We have that. We can have another break line in before the anchor element, so refresh that again. We can have some spacing at the top, but you get the point. You can design this application however you want to. And if I hover over here, it is going to slash post slash the ID. So if I click on that, it's actually bringing up the entire article, and you can see it's sometimes loading the images. As I said, it's localhost, it's not able to point it to the blogger location of the image hosting URL, but you get the point. This is your blog post, and it's working with your ASP.NET Core application, and we are using Entity Framework Core to talk to the SQL Server database. And this way you'll have all the blog posts over here. But for that you have to use an ng for loop and not just one. So I'll in the finishing touch, I will have in the posts component, instead of using a single post, I will now again use all the posts instead. So this dot posts, and now I'll just iterate on the posts. So I will have a for each loop here. So for loop ng for let post of posts, and everything else should work as is. The single post is getting displayed. If we had multiple, you can seed as many as you want. It will have a scroll bar and it will show you multiple blog posts, and you can click on that single blog post to actually go inside and view all the details. So as you can see now, it loaded all the images correctly, so that's good. And as you can see, it's now bringing up the entire blog. So yeah, this is now complete. The Angular application is now complete as well. And as you can see, we created this blog section for the public, but we also have the admin area for managing the blogs, where the admin can, perform CRUD operations on the blog application. I hope you liked the video. And if you did like the video, please press the like button and subscribe to my channel, and also press the bell notifications icon so that you don't miss my next upload. And share your love in the comment section. If you have any suggestions for me, please do so in the comment section as well, and just let me know what you want to see next from me inside the comment section. So make sure you comment down below. And yeah, take care, have a lovely day, and I will see you all in the next video.